Claire was the kind of girl everyone passed without looking twice. And yet I need you to stop because there is something about her no one has dared to say out loud. For months, she walked across the same streets, into the same store, through the same rain, wearing the same pair of battered sneakers that should have fallen apart weeks ago. They weren't just shoes. They were clinging to her like some part of her body that refused to let go. People whispered about it under their breath, that maybe she couldn't afford another pair. Maybe she didn't care. But you and I both know whispers always carry something heavier. Something we're afraid to confront directly. And here's the part no one talks about. Those shoes never wore down. Not the laces, not the soles, not even the faded logo that should have peeled away by now. They stayed whole, as though the ground itself refused to mark them. I'm not telling you this like a story. I'm telling you because I saw it. I was there when the first strange thing happened. The moment that still plays back in my head every night like a film reel I can T-burn. It was a gray morning outside of a gas station on Jefferson Street, and Claire was standing at the edge of the lot. Her head tilted like she was listening to something no one else could hear. A man walked by some drifter, unshaven, tired end. As he passed her, he leaned close enough to brush her shoulder and whispered a word. Just one word, too soft for anyone but her, and then he vanished. I don't mean he walked away. I mean he disappeared. His shadow didn't fall on the pavement. His footsteps never echoed. He was there, and then he wasn't. People around her kept moving, filling their cars, scrolling on their phones, as if nothing at all had broken the air open. But I saw her face freeze. I saw her grip the laces of those shoes like they were the only anchor she had left in this world. Since then, I can stop asking myself if I really witnessed it, or if my mind fractured for a split second under the weight of something I was never meant to notice. Because last night, when I finally worked up the nerve to search her name to see if anyone else remembered, I found a single headline buried deep where it shouldn't be. A name we all know. A company you'd never expect. Nike, and under it, in small black letters that made my stomach drop. They're calling her in. And that's when I realized maybe those shoes aren't hers anymore. Maybe they never were. I read the headline again and again until the words blurred into static. Until I was unsure if I was staring at a screen or a mirror, catching my own reflection in the glow. Asterisk Nike is calling her in. Simple, clean, corporate. Nothing that should feel dangerous. But my stomach knew better. I felt the weight of that sentence in my chest like a door slamming shut somewhere I couldn't see. Claire, who walked everywhere in silence, who wore shoes that refused to die, who watched a man vanish into thin air without anyone else noticing, was suddenly on the radar of the biggest brand in the world. And I swear, for a split second, the screen flickered like an old VHS tape catching. When it came back, the headline was gone, replaced by an empty white page. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, refreshed the browser. Nothing. A blank screen, as if I'd hallucinated the whole thing. But the part that unsettled me most wasn't T losing the headline, it was the faint echo that crept through my speakers the moment it disappeared. Not words, not music, just the sound of breath. Someone inhaling too close to the mic, right there in my room. Synced to the rhythm of my own lungs until I couldn't tell if I was listening or being listened to. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying Jefferson Street in my head, the gas station, the way the drifter leaned in, and whispered something too low for me to catch. Had Claire even reacted? I remembered a hand tightening on her laces, but the more I forced the memory, the more it shifted. In one replay, her eyes widened, sharp with recognition. In another, she didn't move at all, her face as still as a mannequin. And then I asked myself the question I'd been dodging since it all started. What if he had vanished? What if I'd just lost him in the crowd? What if I'd imagined everything? By morning, I was desperate enough to look for someone else who might have seen what I did. That's when I remembered Aaron. Not a friend, exactly, more like a shadow I kept bumping into. He'd been at the gas station that day, leaning against his beat-up Chevy, staring into nothing the way people do when they're trying to leave the world behind. We'd gone to the same high school once, barely spoke then, but when I called him, he answered on the first ring like he'd been waiting. "Yeah," he said, before I could even explain. His voice was low, ragged. You saw it too. The way he said it made my skin crawl. No hesitation. No surprise. Like we'd shared some forbidden secret neither of us asked for. But the more he talked, the less I trusted him. He claimed he'd seen the drifter too, but in his version, the man didn't vanish, he burned. Not flames exactly, but a shimmer? Like heat rising off asphalt, until he dissolved into thin air. Erin swore Claire didn't flinch, didn't grab her laces, didn't even look at him. She just whispered the word back, repeating whatever had been passed into her ear, like she was the one pulling him apart. I wanted to dismiss him, tell myself he was lying, or crazy, or both. But the thing about Aaron was that his lies always carried enough truth to make you doubt your own memory. And as he kept talking, I started to question the details I'd clung to. Did I really see Claire's hand move? Did I imagine the tension in her face? Or had I been filling in the blanks with fear? That night, I tried recording myself. Just a test, I told myself, to prove the glitches, the breaths, the whispers weren't real. I left my phone on the nightstand, camera off, audio rolling, and lay down. Hours later, I woke to silence. Not the kind that comforts you in the middle of the night, but the kind that feels deliberate, like someone pressed mute on the world. When I played the recording back, most of it was empty. Just a low hum of my own breathing. But at 3:12 a.m., right as the date shifted, I heard something that froze me in place. A woman's voice, soft, deliberate, almost tender. Don't tell him what you saw. That was it. No footsteps, no static, just that one line. And here is the part I can get out of my head when I checked the file S metadata. It said the audio had been captured 2 hours before I ever hit record, as if the warning had been waiting for me, already written into the night. I didn't tell Aaron about the file. I couldn't. He was already unraveling. When I saw him next, he looked hollow, thinner than I remembered, like someone had been carving pieces off him in the dark. He kept asking me if I remembered our high school gym, if I remembered the fire drill in sophomore year, if I remembered seeing him in the parking lot that afternoon. Each question sharpened the dread in me because I didn't remember. Not just those moments, whole chunks of time. They were gone, like pages ripped from a diary I swore I'd written. That's when I realized something was wrong with my memory. Not the normal kind of forgetting. Not the way time blurs faces and dates. This was surgical. Precise. Whole hours missing, replaced by a gray static in my mind that felt like I was reciting the story of a life that might not be mine. And Aaron wouldn't stop pressing. He said Nike wasn't calling Claire in to sponsor her, or interview her, or make her some poster child. He said they were recalling her. Like she was a product. The word hit me harder than I expected. Asterisk, recalling. Like she wasn't human anymore. Like she'd never been. I wanted to laugh at the paranoia, but every time I saw Claire in those shoes walking the cracked sidewalks, head tilted to some invisible frequency, I felt it. The wrongness. The air bending around her. And then, 2 days ago, I saw something that broke me open completely. I was driving past the Jefferson gas station again, the same place where it all started, when I spotted her standing at the edge of the lot, staring at the asphalt. Same shoes, same stillness. But this time, I wasn't alone. Aaron was there too, leaning against his Chevy. He raised his hand in a kind of half-wave, like he expected me. But here's the part I can't explain, the part that keeps me up every night since. Aaron has been dead for 5 years. I went to his funeral. I remember the closed casket. I remember the way his mother collapsed against the pew. I remember signing my name in the book. So tell me how I saw him alive in the same place where everything started, waving at me like none of it ever happened. And tell me why. When I checked my phone later, there was a new recording waiting for me time-stamped during that drive where my own voice whispered into the mic, "You don't want to remember." I don't know if I'm losing my mind, or if the truth has been inside my head this whole time, carved out piece by piece, hidden where no one will ever find it. But Nike is still calling her in, and I don't think she'll be coming back. 4 days after seeing Aaron alive, standing exactly where he shouldn't, Tia Benai carried the weight of disbelief like a stone in my chest. Every explanation I tried to form crumbled in my hands. Hallucination, exhaustion, unresolved grief, they all sounded reasonable, clean, but none of them fit, because my memory of that moment was too sharp. To tactile. The faded Chevy paint catching the afternoon sun. The way his half-wave hung in the air like he was acknowledging something unspoken between us. And for a moment, I convinced myself I had cracked the mystery. That the entire riddle of Claire, of the shoes, of the whisper, of the recordings was all about memory. A glitch, I told myself. A neurological misfire that made me remember what wasn't there, or forget what should have been. Maybe that was the hidden truth all along. Maybe I wasn't cursed or haunted or being followed by some nameless presence. Maybe I was just sick. I clung to that explanation like a lifeline. I booked an appointment with a neurologist downtown, a man whose office was crammed with MRI scans pinned to the walls like grim wallpaper. He listened to me with that careful, practiced sympathy doctors keep on hand for patients who sound unstable. But when I told him about Aaron, about Claire, about the voice in my recordings, he didn't laugh. He didn't dismiss me. Instead, he asked if I'd ever experienced anything like this before. And in that instant, a memory broke through. Sharp and uninvited. I was 12, standing in the hallway of my old middle school during a tornado drill. Everyone crouched against the wall, heads tucked, hands locked over their necks. But I remember standing apart, frozen, because at the far end of the hall, I saw my father. Only he wasn't supposed to be there. He had died the year before, car accident on Route 12, crushed between two semis in the rain. Yet there he was, in the same gray jacket he wore the night he left, holding out his hand for me. Nobody else reacted. Nobody else lifted their head. It was as though the world had split, and I alone was caught between two versions of it. And just like Aaron, he looked at me like he'd been waiting. The neurologist said nothing while I tried to explain. And for a brief, dizzying moment, I thought I'd found the thread. Memory glitch. Trauma. A mind rewriting what it couldn't bear to face. It all lined up, neat and clinical, and I almost believed it. But then he asked me something strange. What shoes was your father wearing that day? The question should have meant nothing. But the moment it hit me, the memory faltered. I saw him standing at the end of the hall. Yes, but when I tried to picture his feet, my mind went blank. Like someone had blurred out that detail, painted it over with gray. And when I looked back at the doctor, I realized he wasn't writing anything down. He wasn't even holding a pen. He was just staring at me, hands folded, waiting for an answer I couldn't give. That night, I tried to settle myself. I played the old logic back. It's all in your head. Trauma rewiring your memory. Nothing more. But then the recordings came back. Only this time, I didn't press record. My phone was face down on the nightstand. Battery low. No apps open. Yet when I woke, there was a new file waiting. The timestamp matched the hour I'd been asleep, and when I pressed play, the sound that filled the room wasn't breathing, wasn't whispers, it was the sound of sneakers squeaking against a polished gym floor. Over and over. Familiar, rhythmic, suffocating in its repetition. It unlocked something I had buried. Sophomore year, the fire drill Aaron had asked me about. The one I swore I didn't remember. Suddenly I did. We went outside in the parking lot. We were in the gym. Lights out. Bleachers pulled back. The whole class crammed together under the buzzing and in the middle of that chaos, a sound rose, the squeak of shoes, moving in circles, though nobody was on the court. I remember the silence spreading, everyone going rigid, until the principal barked for us to get out. Later, no one mentioned it. Not the sound, not the tension, not the way every exit door stuck for a moment before opening. Back then, I told myself I must have imagined it. But now, hearing that same sound through my phone, I knew it wasn't imagination. It was a memory, buried and scrubbed, only to resurface years later. I wanted to tell Aaron, but the truth lodged in me like a splinter. The person I had seen at the gas station couldn't have been Aaron? He was already gone. So why did the memory of his face keep folding into every other impossible moment I'd lived through? My father in the hallway? Claire at the gas station. All of them watching me like they knew the script and I didn't. I tried to push it down, to cling to the false resolution I'd built for myself. Memory glitch. Trauma. That was easier, safer. But the next night, while scrolling aimlessly to distract myself, I came across another article. Not hidden this time. Not flickering away when I refreshed. Just sitting there, clean and simple, like it had been waiting. The headline read, Asterisk Jefferson High Gym closed indefinitely. After structural concerns. Asterisk only Jefferson High had been torn down years ago, and the picture attached to the article wasn't of a ruined building. It was the gym, exactly as I remembered it. Lights buzzing, bleachers pulled back, exit doors shining red. But the detail that turned my stomach the floor, you could see them clearly pressed into the polished wood, circling endlessly. Shoe prints. And I swear to you, they were Claire's. The article had no byline, no date, no comments, just the headline, the image, and then at the bottom, one line in bold black text. You don't want to remember, I shut my laptop, but it didn't matter. The words weren't just on the screen anymore. They were in my head, looping, echoing, layering over themselves until they sounded less like a warning and more like a command. That was the moment I realized the danger wasn't in what I'd seen. It was in what I'd been made to forget. Something has been with me since that first drill, since that first impossible memory of my father reaching out, since long before Claire and her impossible shoes. It doesn't shout. It doesn't break through the walls. It just waits, always in the corner, erasing and rewriting until I no longer trust the story of my own life. And tonight, when I checked my phone, there was another recording waiting. Only this one wasn't audio. It was video. The screen flickered before loading, then showed a dark room I didn't recognize. The camera angled low. At first, nothing. Just silence. And then me. Sitting in the corner, head bowed, wearing the same sneakers Claire wears. That's when I understood. This hasn't been Claire's story at all. It's been mine. And if that's true, then everything I've told, Youth Adrifter, the gas station, Aaron, even Claire herself might not be real. Or worse, they are real, but only because something else wanted me to believe they were. So I'll ask you one thing before this cuts out. If you rewind everything I've said, every chapter, every memory do, you notice the detail I never once mentioned. The color of the shoes. Because when I close my eyes now, they aren't gray or white or black. They're red. The same red as the gym doors. The same red as the exit signs that wouldn't open. And the same red that's glowing behind me now. Though I swear, the room was dark a second ago. I thought it was only me. I thought I was losing myself alone, unraveling in private, the way people do when they're too afraid to speak out. But last week, when I woke to another file on my phone, something shifted. It wasn't audio this time. Not video either. Just text, a single sentence typed out in plain white letters against a black background. Asterisk, you were right all along. No sender, no metadata, no notification showing how or when it had arrived. The message shouldn't have existed, but it was there, waiting, pulsing like a heartbeat on the screen. And here's the part that unstitched me completely. The moment I read it, I knew it wasn't meant for me. That night, the dreams began again. But they weren't mine. They carried the weight of other minds, other lives bleeding into my own. In one, I was standing at the edge of a school gym, the wood floor shining under sickly fluorescent light, watching footprints form and vanish in circles that never ended. In another, I was sitting in a subway car alone, except every window reflected not my face but Claire's, her lips moving silently in words I couldn't hear. And in the last dream, the worst one, I was on Jefferson Street at dawn, looking down to see my own sneakers tied with laces I didn't recognize. Laces that looped themselves without my hands touching them. When I woke, sweat clinging to me like a second skin, I checked my phone again. Another file. Another message. We dreamed this too. I wanted to tell myself it was a joke. A cruel trick by someone who had hacked into my life. But the handwriting wasn't digital. Buried in my inbox was a picture, grainy, time-stamped 20 years ago. It showed a classroom blackboard with words scrawled across it in chalk. Asterisk, do not trust what they make you forget. The chalk was smudged, the room blurred with age, but I recognized the desks. I recognized the posters peeling from the walls. It was my 7th grade classroom, the same place where I first swore I saw my father again, long after his funeral. That was the moment I realized there were others people who had been following, maybe 4 years, maybe since the very beginning. They weren't leaving me messages for comfort. They were warning me, and the more I let myself see it, the more it became undeniable. The same symbols started appearing everywhere I looked. On the side of train cars, etched into bus seats, carved faintly into park benches. A circle drawn in one continuous line, broken only at the bottom where the loop should have closed. Once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. And now I knew what it meant. It was a door that had never been shut. The others had been communicating in secret, in ways we weren't meant to decode. It wasn't a coincidence that I found a VHS tape in a box of donations at the library, unlabeled, warped at the edges, with static running through it like veins. When I played it, the image cracked into life, showing children in a gymnasium lined up against the wall. Their faces were blurred, but their shoes were clear. The same model, the same impossible condition. Unworn, unbroken, untouched by time. And then, just before the tape cut out, one of the children lifted their head and stared straight into the camera, as if they could see me watching. As if they'd been waiting 20 years for me to press play. The dread became unbearable, because the symbols weren't just out there in the world anymore, they were in me! Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that circle burning into the dark, unclosing, endless. It wasn't a logo, wasn't a brand, wasn't anything that simple. It was a warning carved into human memory itself. And I began to understand that identity, the way we think of ourselves, as fixed, as stable, as whole, was only another mask. We are rewritten, constantly redacted like classified files, and the gaps are where they slip through. I say they because I don't know what else to call it. Not people, not ghosts, not corporations, not government. Something larger, quieter, watching, waiting for the moment we think we're safe enough to stop asking questions. And now, I believe it, has never been about Claire or Aaron or my father or the shoes at all. They are placeholders. Roles played out in front of us, bait to keep us looking in the wrong direction. The proof came 3 nights ago when I received the third perspective. Not a dream, not a message, but a live feed. My phone lit up at 2:17 a.m. Screen black except for the words asterisk found footage from 20 years ago. Watch carefully. The video began shaky, handheld, as though recorded by someone hiding. The lens jerked toward a group of children in a dim auditorium, their voices low, indistinct. One child broke away, carrying a notebook, and the camera followed. I should have recognized him immediately, but I couldn't. Not until the child turned, and I saw his face. It was mine. My 12-year-old self, looking directly into the lens, holding up the notebook. On the cover, written in hurried block letters, were the words, "You're not crazy, they lied to you." My stomach clenched. My hands trembled, and for a moment I thought I was about to wake up. But the feed didn't end. A second voice cut in. Low, raspy, urgent. "If you're seeing this, they're already watching. Don't let them rewrite this part." And then, silence. I couldn't breathe because it meant someone else had been there with me all along. Someone recording, someone keeping track, someone who remembered what I couldn't. An observer outside the narrative, watching me stumble through my own life, like a pawn on a board I didn't know existed. Maybe they were the only one telling the truth, or maybe they were just another layer of the lie. But either way, it shattered the illusion that I'd been alone. Since then, I've noticed the others more clearly. Not by name, not by face, but by the way they watch me in public places. Eyes meeting mine a fraction too long, hands brushing the circle symbol into condensation on windows. Some smile like they pity me. Some look away, ashamed. And some lean close enough that I hear the whisper again, the same cadence, the same warning, though the words change every time. Once it was asterisk, "Don't tell them what you saw." Another time, it was there recalling you next. I can't tell anymore if my memories are mine or if they belong to the network of others who are bleeding into me. Maybe that's the point. Maybe identity was never solid to begin with. We are all echoes of the same file, overwritten, corrupted, but still carrying fragments that don't erase cleanly. That's why we dream together. That's why the symbols follow us. That's why we recognize places we've never been. And now I'm left with one thought I can't shake. If they've been watching since the beginning, then what does that make you the one hearing this now? Did you stumble on this by chance, or have you been part of it from the start? Before this cuts out, before the circle closes again, I'll leave you with what the observer said in the final seconds of that found footage. Words I haven't been able to forget. This isn't the first time you've lived this story. Look closer. You'll see the seams. The screen went black, but in the reflection I saw a detail I wasn't supposed to. My own face staring back at me, mouth moving in silence, lips forming words I knew but couldn't hear. And in that reflection, standing just behind me, there were others, watching, waiting, like they always have. I used to think the mystery was about Claire, about the shoes, about the man who vanished, about Aaron waving at me from the grave. I thought if I pulled hard enough at those threads, I'd unravel the secret hiding underneath. But now, standing here, I understand that the real question was never asterisk what happened. It was why it happened and why it keeps happening at all. I don't know how to explain this in a way that makes sense without confessing something I've never told anyone, not even myself. The truth is, I wanted it to be real. I wanted the vanishing, the whispers, the impossible recordings, because if they weren't real, then I'd have to face something much darker. That all of this every detail, every symbol, every glitch in memory was me. My mind building a prison and locking me inside. My trauma scripting illusions to distract me from the silence of being alone. And I can tell you what terrifies me more that I've been chosen by something outside myself, or that I've been abandoned to the echo chamber of my own breaking mind. But here's the part that won't let me go. It's not just me. There are others. I've seen their signs. I've dreamed their dreams. I've read their messages scratched into chalkboards and carved into benches and burned into the grain of gym floors. We've all been touched by something, call it memory manipulation, call it trauma, call it a force older than language, and it has left us carrying the same scar. One that doesn't show on the skin but pulses inside us every time we try to remember. And so I keep circling back to one unbearable question. Why us? Why me? What's the purpose of being rewritten, erased, filled with false details and missing hours? The more I sit with it, the more I realize maybe it isn't about control. Maybe it isn't even about surveillance or experiments or corporations or governments. Maybe it's about breaking us open, hollowing us out until the thin layer we call identity gives way. Maybe we aren't meant to cling to who we think we are. Maybe the forgetting is the point. That thought should terrify me, but instead, it makes me feel something closer to grief. Because if I am not, if I am just a collection of fractured memories shaped by something unseen, then who have I been grieving all this time? My father, Aaron, Claire. Or are they just projections, placeholders in a story I was forced to live? So I'd never look too closely at the author behind it. Tonight, I tried something I've been avoiding since the beginning. I sat down, in the dark, and whispered the question I've never allowed myself to ask. Asterisk, what do you want from me? And for the first time, the answer came back not as a recording, not as a glitch, but from my own throat, in a voice I didn't recognize. To remember why it matters. The words shook me because they weren't cruel. They weren't threatening. They felt like something you'd say to a child who's been lost too long. And in that moment, I realized the choice in front of me wasn't about survival. It was about belief. I could choose to keep fighting, clawing for logic, demanding proof until I bled out on the floor of my own confusion. Or I could step into the uncertainty, admit that being human isn't about holding on to truth, but about daring to live with questions that will never resolve. That's the painful confession. I don't want the answers anymore. I want the questions. Because maybe the only thing that makes us human is the willingness to face the unknown without tearing ourselves apart. But here's the fracture that keeps splitting wider the moment I allowed myself to surrender. To believe in not knowing, I felt the presence in the room shift. Not away from me, but into me. As though the force that has been circling my life was never outside, never watching from the shadows, but pulsing in my veins from the beginning. And when I looked at my reflection on the black glass of the television, on the screen of my phone, on the window pane, I didn't just see myself, I saw all of them. Claire, Aaron, my father, and countless others I don't have names for. Each face flickering in and out like channels caught between stations. Do you see what that means? The mystery isn't theirs. It isn't mine. It's ours! Shared. Threaded through us like a current that never stops humming. That's why we see the same symbols, dream the same dreams, lose the same pieces of time. That's why we've been circling, all of us, for years. And yet, even as this realization opens me, I know there's still danger. Because if identity is this fragile, if memory is this malleable, then what stops them, whoever they are, from rewriting this too? From turning even this confession into another layer of the lie? What if the choice I feel I'm making now was already scripted, already decided, already carved into the cracks of my mind years before I spoke it aloud? I don't know if this is the beginning of freedom or just the deepest level of control. All I know is that my chest feels lighter and heavier at the same time. Like I've finally looked at the wound I've been carrying, even if it kills me to see it. So, if you're listening, if you've been here all along, silently tracing the same circle in the dark, then maybe you understand. Maybe this isn't a story we escape. Maybe this is a story we live again and again until the seams finally split and the hidden truth tears its way through. And if that day comes, maybe we'll realize the point was never to solve the mystery, but to admit we were never meant to hold it alone. Because some truths don't set you free. They change you into something you never asked to become. And now that I've spoken it, now that you've heard it, you can't go back either. You'll carry it with you. You'll see it in reflections. You'll feel it in the silence between breaths. And one night, when the circle appears in your dreams, you'll know it wasn't just my story. It was already yours. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for stories you were never meant to hear. Until next time, remember, some truths don't want to be found.